God is fully knowledgeable and all capable and equal in all three forms, then he cannot be ignorant.
I don't think Christians have to grant that Jesus truly didn't know the hour of his return. See my old video, Is the Christian View of Jesus a Contradiction, for one such argument. But let's suppose, for the sake of argument, I grant that Jesus truly did not know the hour of his return and is thus not omniscient. Is this problematic? Is this a contradiction? No, let's talk about why. While I believe that the Trinity as a whole has certain properties and has them essentially, that doesn't commit me to saying that every member of the Trinity has the same properties as the whole. In fact, that would be insane. For instance, I think the Trinity has the property of being tripersonal, yet clearly the members of the Trinity don't each have the property of being tripersonal. Similarly, I don't see why it would be problematic for a Christian to say that God, being used in this sense to refer to the Trinity as a whole, is omniscient. Nonetheless, one part of the Trinity, after the incarnation, does not have the property of being omniscient. So then we might ask, is Jesus still divine under this understanding? And I think so. If you say Jesus is not divine under this view, you are implicitly saying that in order for a person to be divine, they have to have every property that the Trinity has. But why think a thing like that? I think a person can reasonably be called divine in virtue of them being a member of the Trinity and being of the divine soul. But suppose somebody says now, oh no, if Jesus is part of the Trinity and it's the Trinity as a whole which is identified as God, then you can't say Jesus is God, you can just say he is part of God or something like that. Now I think it's important at this point to point out that this is largely a semantic argument about how we should use language, and it doesn't really object to my view that Jesus is divine. However, I don't think a Christian is doing anything idiosyncratic with our language when we say Jesus is God, even though we think God is identified with the Trinity, of which Jesus is a part. And the reason for this is that in our everyday language, we commonly refer to parts of a whole using language that also represents the whole. For instance, if my brother stops by and hangs out for a bit, I might say, my family stopped by. However, family is technically a term that refers to all those who I am related to, of which my brother is only a part. However, it would be silly to say, oh, you can't say you were hanging out with your family, you should just say you were hanging out with a part of your family. Or suppose my friend rolls up in his car and I hop in and it's just filthy inside. I might say, bro, your car is really dirty. And again, technically what I'm saying is dirty, it's just a part of the car, but we don't see any problem with this. I want to make clear these two examples I just gave are not being provided as analogies for the Trinity. They are being used as examples of how we regularly refer to parts using the same term as a whole. Similarly, if there are three persons in the divine soul and one of these divine persons comes to earth and talks to me during my breakfast, I don't see that it's irrational or deceptive if I tell my friends later, hey, God came and talked to me today. This is why Christians commonly say Jesus is God, even though we don't think Jesus is the Trinity as a whole. Once one makes a distinction of God being used in reference to the Trinity as a whole and God being used in a looser sense of just being divine, all these Muslim attempts at argument just evaporate, as everything they argue is just guilty of an equivocation fallacy.